The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but David Reynolds kept sipping it anyway. His shift monitoring deep space frequencies was supposed to end at midnight, but something kept nagging at him. For 3 days running, he had noticed strange patterns in the background static that decorated his screens aboard the research vessel Meridian. Most people would have dismissed it as cosmic interference, the usual noise that filled the void between stars. David had been doing this job for 12 years, though, and his ears had learned to pick out things that didn't belong. Tonight, that persistent whisper in Channel 7 finally resolved into something that made his blood run cold. It wasn't random noise. It was a conversation. David's hands shook as he adjusted the filters and boosted the signal strength. The voices became clearer, speaking in clicking, whistling sounds that definitely weren't human. He grabbed his headset and started recording everything while his other hand reached for the emergency communications button. Within minutes, the ship's senior staff crowded into the communications bay. Captain Anne Bradley arrived first, still, buttoning her uniform jacket. Behind her came Dr. Michael Torres, the linguist who had been pulled from his sleep. The man's gray hair stuck up at odd angles, but his eyes were sharp and focused as he listened to the alien transmission. "How long has this been going on?" Captain Bradley asked, her voice tight with concern. "The signal started weak 3 days ago," David explained, his fingers dancing over the controls to clean up the audio. "But tonight it got strong enough to understand that it's definitely artificial. 2 distinct voices, structured communication, patterns. This isn't natural phenomenon." Dr. Torres leaned closer to the speakers, his decades of studying languages kicking into high gear. He pulled out a tablet and started making notes, sketching symbols that represented the sounds he was hearing. The clicking and whistling continued in what sounded like a normal conversation between 2 individuals. "Can you make any sense of it yet?" the captain asked. "Give me time," Torres replied, not looking up from his notes. "Language follows patterns, even alien ones. The repetition of certain sound clusters suggests this might be a military communication, very formal, very structured, not casual conversation." The transmission continued for another 20 minutes before cutting off abruptly. The 3 humans sat in silence for a moment, processing what they had just witnessed. First contact with an alien species wasn't supposed to happen like this, by accident, while monitoring empty space. David played back the recording while Dr. Torres worked to decode the meaning. Hours passed as the linguist built a basic framework for understanding the alien language. Around dawn, he finally looked up with an expression that made everyone in the room nervous. "I need to contact Earth Command immediately," Torres said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What did they say?" Captain Bradley demanded. Torres looked down at his notes, double-checking his translation before speaking. "They were discussing Earth, our planet. They've been watching us for a long time, and they're planning something bad." The next few hours became a blur of activity as Dr. Torres worked to decode more of the transmission. What he discovered painted a picture that no one wanted to believe. The aliens called themselves the Dominion, and they had been studying human civilization for decades. Their assessment was brutal and dismissive. According to their conversation, humans were classified as a primitive species with limited defensive capabilities. The aliens had watched human wars, studied human technology, and concluded that Earth would be an easy target for conquest. They spoke about humans the same way humans might discuss cattle. "They've done this before," Torres explained to the growing crowd of officers and scientists gathered in the communications bay. 17 other worlds, all conquered using the same basic strategy. They study the target species from a distance, plan their attack, then overwhelm them before any organized resistance can form. The most chilling part of the translation came near the end of the transmission. The aliens discussed Earth's resources in detail, from mineral wealth to what they called biological assets. The human population, they determined, would be useful as a labor force after proper conditioning and population management. Captain Bradley felt sick as she listened to the translation. These creatures were talking about enslaving humanity, treating people like livestock to be managed and controlled. The casual tone of their discussion made it even worse. To them, this was just another routine operation. "There's more," Torres continued, his face pale. "They mentioned a timeline, something about initiating Phase 1 in 30 rotations. Based on their language patterns and the mathematical relationships I can identify, I think 30 rotations means roughly 6 weeks in human time." The room fell silent as everyone processed this information. 6 weeks until an alien invasion that Earth didn't even know was coming. 6 weeks to prepare for an enemy that had successfully conquered 17 other worlds. David looked at his instruments, still showing the empty channel where the alien transmission had appeared. "Should we try to contact them? Let them know we intercepted their message?" "Absolutely not," Captain Bradley said firmly. "If they know we heard them, they might change their plans or attack sooner. Right now, our only advantage is that they think we're completely unaware." Torres nodded in agreement. "Their entire strategy depends on surprise and the target species being unprepared. If they suspect Earth knows about the coming attack, they might call for reinforcements or use different tactics." Captain Bradley turned to her communications officer. "David, I need you to send an encrypted burst transmission to Earth Command, immediately. Priority Alpha clearance. Tell them we have confirmation of imminent alien invasion and request immediate contact with the highest levels of government." As David began composing the message that would change everything, Dr. Torres continued working on the translation. Every word the aliens had spoken needed to be understood, every detail of their plan extracted and analyzed. Earth's survival might depend on how well they could interpret their enemy's intentions. The research vessel Meridian had started this mission, studying cosmic background radiation and mapping distant star systems. Now they found themselves carrying the most important intelligence in human history. In 6 weeks, Earth would face an enemy that had never known defeat, expecting to find helpless prey. What the aliens didn't realize was that their intercepted conversation had just given humanity the one thing they needed most: time to prepare. The emergency session of the United Earth Council had been called for 3 in the morning, Geneva time. President Maria Santos walked into the secure conference room, knowing that the next few hours would determine the fate of human civilization. The message from the research vessel Meridian had been brief but terrifying. Alien invasion confirmed, 6 weeks to prepare. Around the table sat the most powerful people on Earth: military leaders, heads of state, intelligence directors, and scientists who had spent their careers preparing for this exact scenario. What none of the aliens knew was that humanity had been planning for first contact since the 1960s, and those plans had assumed the worst-case situation. General Robert Hayes stood at the head of the room, his weathered face grim as he activated the holographic display. 3-dimensional images of spacecraft, weapon platforms, and defensive installations appeared in the air above the table. Most of the people in the room had never seen these images before, despite their high security clearances. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hayes began, "let me introduce you to Project Sentinel." For the next hour, Hayes explained what humanity had been building in secret for over 60 years. Hidden throughout the solar system were automated defense platforms, disguised as asteroids or space debris. Weapon systems had been installed in mines, subway tunnels, and underground facilities around the world. Entire military units existed that didn't appear on any official records. Admiral Lisa Chang took over the briefing, showing satellite images of what appeared to be normal cities and industrial areas. With the touch of a button, the images changed to reveal the hidden defensive installations buried beneath them. "Every major population center has been fortified," she explained, "not just with conventional weapons, but with systems specifically designed to counter advanced alien technology. We've spent decades studying theoretical alien capabilities and building counters for them." The revelation stunned even the most informed members of the council. President Santos had known about defensive preparations, but the scope of what had been built exceeded her wildest expectations. Humanity had turned itself into a trap, waiting to be sprung. Dr. Emma Watson, the head of the Theoretical Weapons Division, presented the next phase of the briefing. Her team had spent 30 years developing technologies that didn't officially exist. Energy weapons, kinetic bombardment systems, and defensive shields that operated on principles most scientists thought were impossible. The intercepted alien. Communication gives us unprecedented intelligence about their capabilities and tactics, Watson explained. They're using a standard invasion protocol that has worked for them 17 times before. They expect us to panic, fragment, and fall apart under coordinated assault. Military strategist Colonel Frank Miller stepped forward with the operational plans. His approach was simple and brutal. Let the aliens believe their intelligence was correct while preparing the most sophisticated ambush in military history. We maintain complete communication silence, Miller explained. No unusual military movements, no panic, no indication that we know they're coming. For 6 weeks, Earth continues normal operations while we position every asset for maximum effect. The plan required incredible discipline from every level of government and military. Normal life had to continue while the greatest military mobilization in human history happened in secret. Factory workers would report to jobs that were actually defensive installations. Office buildings would conceal weapon systems. Subway trains would transport soldiers instead of commuters. President Santos asked the question everyone was thinking. What if we're wrong? What if their technology is so advanced that our preparations don't matter? General Hayes smiled for the first time during the briefing. Madam President, we've been intercepting their communications for 3 days now. Dr. Torres has decoded enough of their language to understand their tactical discussions. They're not gods. They're military commanders following established procedures. The aliens' greatest strength, their proven invasion protocol, was about to become their greatest weakness. They had conquered 17 worlds using the same basic strategy, because it had never failed. They saw no reason to change tactics when facing what they considered primitive humans. Admiral Chang displayed star charts showing the alien fleet's approach vector. They'll arrive exactly where our models predict, in formation patterns we've seen in their transmitted battle plans. They have no idea we can track their movements or understand their communications. The next phase of preparation involved civilian populations. Certain key individuals would receive coded messages, recruiting them for roles they never imagined existed. Teachers became intelligence analysts. Mechanics became weapons technicians. Librarians became tactical coordinators. The aliens' own. Surveillance data would be used against them as humanity prepared its defenses. Dr. Watson presented the timeline for final preparations. We have 6 weeks to complete deployment of assets that have been under construction for decades. Every piece of technology we've developed, every defensive system we've built, every contingency plan we've created, all of it gets activated simultaneously. The meeting lasted 8 hours, with breaks for secure communications to military commanders around the world. By the time it ended, every person in the room understood their role in humanity's survival. The next 6 weeks would determine whether Earth remained free or became the 18th world to fall to the Dominion. As the council members left the secure facility, President Santos remained behind with General Hayes. She looked at the displays, still showing humanity's hidden defenses, trying to comprehend the scale of what had been accomplished in secret. "How long have you known this day would come?" she asked. Hayes looked out the window at the city of Geneva, where people were beginning their morning routines with no idea what was approaching. "Since we first detected radio signals from other star systems, we knew someone else was out there. The question was never if we'd encounter them, but whether that encounter would be peaceful. And you assumed it wouldn't be?" "We planned for the worst and hoped for the best," Hayes replied. These aliens made their intentions clear in their intercepted communications. They see us as resources to be harvested, not people to be respected. That makes this easy. President Santos nodded, understanding the weight of what was about to happen. In 6 weeks, humanity would face its first interstellar war. The enemy expected to find a frightened, primitive species that would collapse under organized assault. Instead, they would discover that Earth's seemingly helpless population had spent decades preparing for exactly this scenario. The hunters were about to become the hunted, and they had no idea what was waiting for them. Tom Mitchell had been working the night shift at the old copper mine for 15 years. He thought he knew every tunnel, every shaft, and every piece of equipment in the facility. So when strange people in military uniforms started showing up, with trucks full of equipment he'd never seen before, Tom figured someone owed him an explanation. The explanation came in the form of Commander Alex Turner, a man who introduced himself with credentials Tom couldn't even pronounce. Turner sat down in the mine's break room and told Tom something that sounded like science fiction. Earth was about to be invaded by aliens, and the copper mine was actually a disguised military installation. For 40 years, this mine has been extracting copper during the day and installing defensive systems at night, Turner explained, showing Tom blueprints that revealed hidden chambers and weapon systems throughout the facility. Every shift supervisor has been a military officer. Every mining accident that closed sections of tunnels was actually construction work on defensive positions. Tom stared at the blueprints, recognizing areas of the mine he'd been told were unsafe for decades. According to these plans, those sections housed missile launchers, communication arrays, and something called kinetic artillery systems. The mine he'd worked in for 15 years was actually a fortress. Across the globe, similar conversations were happening in factories, office, buildings, and facilities that appeared completely normal. Susan Lee, a librarian in downtown Portland, received a visit from Dr. Emma Watson, who explained that the library's basement contained one of North America's most sophisticated intelligence processing centers. Every book return, every database search, every piece of information that passes through this building has been analyzed and cataloged, Watson told Susan. We've been mapping human knowledge patterns to predict how different populations might respond to alien invasion tactics. Susan looked around the familiar library with new eyes. The computers she'd been using to help people find books were actually terminals connected to a global intelligence network. The quiet basement storage areas housed servers that had been analyzing human behavior for decades. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, Dr. Michael Torres continued his work translating alien communications. The breakthrough came when he realized the Dominion used mathematical concepts as the foundation of their language. Numbers, ratios, and calculations formed the backbone of how they communicated complex ideas. This discovery revealed something crucial about their enemy. The aliens thought in terms of precise calculations and predictable outcomes. They had studied 17 different species and developed mathematical models for predicting behavior during invasion scenarios. Every aspect of their strategy was based on statistical analysis of how primitive species responded to overwhelming force. They're not warriors, Torres explained to Captain Ann Bradley as they reviewed his latest translations. They're accountants with weapons. Everything they do follows mathematical formulas derived from previous conquests. The alien communications revealed detailed behavioral predictions for humanity. The Dominion expected humans to panic when their ships appeared, predicted that human governments would fragment under pressure, and calculated that organized resistance would collapse within hours of the initial assault. Their mathematical models were perfect, except for one critical flaw. They were based on the assumption that humanity didn't know the invasion was coming. Every calculation depended on the element of surprise and the psychological impact of facing an unknown enemy. Commander Turner coordinated the global deployment of defensive assets with military precision that would have impressed the aliens, if they had been watching. Weapon systems that had been under construction for decades were moved into final positions. Personnel who had been training for scenarios they thought were theoretical were briefed on the real situation they would soon face. The subway system beneath New York City became a rapid deployment network for military forces, maintenance tunnels, that appeared to carry utilities actually housed communication cables connecting defensive installations across the continent. Every major city revealed hidden capabilities that transformed urban areas into military strongpoints. Dr. Watson's team completed their analysis of alien technology based on the intercepted communications. The enemy's weapons operated on principles that human science understood, even if human technology couldn't quite match their efficiency. More importantly, the aliens' defensive systems were designed to counter the types of weapons that primitive species typically used. They're prepared for projectile weapons, chemical explosives, and basic energy attacks, Watson explained during a secure video conference with military leaders worldwide. They're not prepared for the quantum disruption, fields we've developed, or the kinetic bombardment systems we've hidden throughout the solar system. The aliens' own invasion protocol worked against them in ways they couldn't possibly imagine. Their ships would arrive in standard formation patterns that human defensive systems had been specifically designed to target. Their communication frequencies were known, their tactical responses were predictable, and their timeline was completely understood. 3 days before the projected invasion date, humanity made its final preparations. General Robert Hayes stood in the command center beneath Geneva, watching displays that showed the status of defensive systems around the world. Every installation reported ready status. Every weapon system showed green lights. Every personnel unit confirmed their positions. President Maria Santos addressed the world's population through normal television broadcasts, announcing increased military exercises due to elevated international tensions. The public saw routine announcements about training operations and equipment tests. They had no idea they were watching the largest military mobilization in human history disguised as normal activities. In deep space, automated monitoring stations tracked the approaching alien fleet with sensors the enemy couldn't detect. 27 massive warships moved through space in perfect formation, following approach vectors that matched human predictions exactly. The aliens maintained communication silence, believing their arrival would be a complete surprise. Supreme Admiral Korth reviewed his battle plans one final time, confident that his proven strategy would achieve another quick victory. Intelligence reports showed humans still engaged in their usual conflicts and competitions, completely unaware of the approaching fleet. The mathematical models predicted total victory within 12 hours of initial contact. The stage was set for a battle that both sides expected to win decisively. The aliens approached with the confidence of 17 successful conquests, while humanity waited with defensive systems specifically designed to counter every aspect of the dominions. Proven tactics. On the surface, Earth appeared completely normal. Cities functioned normally, traffic moved through usual patterns, and people went about their daily routines without any sign of panic or preparation. Beneath this facade of normalcy, the most sophisticated trap in military history waited to be sprung. The hunters had no idea they were flying directly into the crosshairs of prey that had spent decades preparing for this exact moment. The morning sky over Earth looked perfectly normal when reality tore itself apart. 27 massive alien warships dropped out of hyperspace in precise formation, their dark hulls blotting out sections of stars as they moved into attack positions. To any observer, it would have seemed like humanity's worst nightmare had just arrived without warning. Supreme Admiral Korth stood on the bridge of his flagship, surveying the blue planet that hung before his fleet like a ripe fruit waiting to be picked. 17 previous conquests had followed the same pattern, and he saw no reason why this one would be different. The humans below had no idea death was approaching from above. His first surprise came when he opened a communication channel to Earth's surface. Standard invasion protocol called for a formal surrender demand delivered to whatever primitive government controlled the target world. The transmission was supposed to reach confused, terrified leaders who would realize the hopelessness of their situation. Instead, Admiral Korth found himself looking at a calm human female in military uniform, sitting in what was obviously a sophisticated command center. Admiral Lisa Chang looked directly at him through the video link and spoke, in perfectly clear Dominion language. "We've been expecting you," she said. "Thank you for arriving exactly on schedule." The words hit Korth like a physical blow. Humans weren't supposed to know the Dominion language. They weren't supposed to be expecting anything. Most importantly, they weren't supposed to be calm and organized when facing superior alien technology. Before Korth could respond, his tactical officer reported something impossible. "Admiral, we're being targeted by multiple weapon systems. The readings don't match anything in our database of primitive species capabilities." Admiral Chang's image smiled on the communication screen. "Admiral Korth, this is Admiral Chang of the Terran Defense Force. We've been monitoring your communications for the past 6 weeks. We know about your battle plans, your previous conquests, and your expectations for this encounter. We're here to disappoint you." The battle began with a coordinated strike that shattered everything the Dominion knew about primitive species warfare. Weapon systems that had been hidden throughout the solar system revealed themselves in devastating attacks that targeted the alien fleet's exact positions. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were fighting with detailed knowledge of Dominion, tactics, and formation patterns. Captain Anne Bradley commanded the hidden defense ship Defiance from a position the aliens never saw coming. Her vessel had been disguised as space debris for 3 weeks, waiting in the exact location where Dominion doctrine called for secondary command ships to position themselves. The first kinetic projectile from her railgun punched through the enemy vessel's shields like they weren't even there. "Target acquired and eliminated," Bradley reported to the command center. Moving to secondary targets. On the surface of Earth, defensive installations that had appeared to be normal buildings, mines, and infrastructure revealed their true nature. Tom Mitchell found himself operating a missile battery that had been hidden beneath the copper mine for 40 years, launching projectiles that tracked alien ships with precision guided by intercepted Dominion communication protocols. Susan Lee sat in the library basement that had secretly been an intelligence processing center, coordinating real-time translation of alien communications as the enemy fleet tried desperately to understand what was happening. Every order, every tactical adjustment, every expression of confusion was immediately translated and transmitted to human forces. Supreme Admiral Korth watched his carefully planned invasion turn into a nightmare of coordinated resistance. Unlike anything in Dominion history, his ships were being targeted by weapons that operated on principles his science couldn't immediately understand. Human defensive systems seemed to predict his tactical responses before he made them. "How are they doing this?" Korth demanded of his tactical staff. "They're supposed to be primitive. They shouldn't have technology that can penetrate our shields." Dr. Emma Watson's quantum disruption fields were working exactly as designed, creating localized distortions in space-time that rendered Dominion defensive systems useless. The aliens' shields were specifically designed to counter energy weapons and projectile attacks used by primitive species. They had no defense against weapons that attacked the fundamental structure of reality itself. The first alien ship was destroyed within minutes of the battle beginning. The massive warship simply came apart as its structural integrity failed under weapons fire it couldn't deflect or absorb. Admiral Chang watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction as humanity's hidden defensive network systematically dismantled the enemy fleet. Commander Alex Turner coordinated ground-based defenses with space-based assets in a display of military cooperation the Dominion had never encountered. Every weapon system, every defensive installation, every hidden asset worked together as part of a unified strategy that treated the entire solar system as a single battlefield. "Second enemy vessel disabled," Turner reported. "Boarding parties are standing by to secure alien technology and survivors." The aliens' communication channels filled with desperate calls for reinforcement and retreat authorization. What they didn't realize was that humanity had been jamming their long-range communications from the moment they arrived. No distress. Signals would reach the Dominion home territories. No warnings about human capabilities would be transmitted to other fleets. Supreme Admiral Korth tried to implement emergency tactical protocols developed for encounters with unexpectedly advanced civilizations. Nothing worked. Every maneuver his fleet attempted seemed to be anticipated and countered by human forces that understood Dominion doctrine better than some of his own officers. "They know everything about us," his intelligence officer reported, panic creeping into his voice. "Our formation patterns, our weapon capabilities, our communication frequencies. It's like they've been studying us for years." The truth was worse than the officer imagined. Humanity had been studying Dominion tactics for weeks, using intercepted communications to build detailed models of alien military doctrine. Every battle plan, every standard response, every tactical option available to the invading fleet was known and countered before the battle even began. As the fight continued, it became clear that this wasn't a battle between equals. This was a trap that had been years in the making, sprung on an enemy that had walked directly into carefully prepared killing fields. The Dominion fleet, which had expected to face scattered resistance from a primitive species, found themselves fighting a coordinated defense that treated their proven tactics like predictable weaknesses. 8 hours after the battle began, 19 alien warships were destroyed or disabled. Supreme Admiral Korth found himself commanding the remnants of a fleet that had never known defeat, watching his ships die one by one against an enemy that shouldn't have existed. The humans weren't just winning, they were making it look easy. And somewhere in the back of Korth's mind, a terrible realization was beginning to form. If humanity could do this to the Dominion's finest fleet, what did that mean for the rest of the Empire? 18 hours after the first alien ship appeared in Earth's solar system, Supreme Admiral Korth stood on the bridge of one of only 3 surviving Dominion vessels. Around him, debris from 24 destroyed warships drifted through space like grave markers for an empire's confidence. The humans had stopped firing, not because they were unable to continue, but because they had made a calculated decision to let 3 ships escape. Admiral Lisa Chang's final transmission to the fleeing vessels was brief and terrifying in its implications. "Return to your territories," she told Korth through the communication link. "Tell them what happened here. Tell them that Earth stands ready to defend not just ourselves, but any world threatened by the Dominion. The age of easy conquest is over." President Maria Santos stood before the combined media of Earth, knowing that her words would soon be broadcast across the galaxy by the surviving alien vessels. She chose them carefully, understanding that this moment would define humanity's place in the galactic community. "To all species throughout the galaxy, this is Earth. We are humanity. For too long, the Dominion has spread unchallenged, enslaving worlds and treating intelligent life as resources to be harvested. Today, that ends. We stand ready to assist any world that seeks freedom from oppression." The aftermath revealed the full scope of what humanity had accomplished. Dr. Emma Watson's scientific teams were already studying wreckage from destroyed alien vessels, reverse engineering technology that would advance human capabilities by centuries. The quantum disruption fields that had torn through Dominion shields were just the beginning of what Earth's scientists could achieve. Tom Mitchell found himself promoted from mine worker to weapons specialist, helping to analyze the alien technology recovered from the battlefield. The copper mine that had hidden defensive systems for 40 years became a research facility where human and alien technologies merged into something entirely new. "We're not just studying their weapons," Dr. Watson explained to a gathering of world leaders. "We're learning their manufacturing processes, their energy systems, their transportation methods. In 6 months, human technology will be unrecognizable." The intelligence gathered from captured alien communications proved even more valuable than the technology. Susan Lee led teams of analysts in mapping the entire Dominion Empire using information extracted from the destroyed fleet's databases. Star charts, military installations, conquered worlds, and administrative centers were all cataloged and analyzed. Commander Alex Turner took charge of forming the Terran Defense Corps, a rapid response force designed to carry the fight to oppressive regimes throughout the galaxy. The same hidden assets that had destroyed the invasion fleet were converted into offensive capabilities that could strike anywhere in known space. Within 3 months of the failed invasion, the first Liberation fleet departed from Earth orbit. Their destination, Kepler Station, one of the 17 worlds conquered by the Dominion. The planet's inhabitants had been slaves for over a century, but intercepted communications indicated they still maintained hidden resistance networks. Captain Anne Bradley commanded the liberation mission from the bridge of her ship, now officially designated the Defiance, rather than hiding behind a cover identity. Her fleet included vessels built using hybrid human-alien technology, crewed by people who had learned their tactics from studying Dominion failures. The liberation of Kepler Station took less than 6 hours. Dominion garrison forces, expecting to face another primitive uprising that could be easily suppressed, found themselves fighting human-led forces that understood their enemy's capabilities better than the enemy understood themselves. Dr. Michael Torres, now serving as head of Xenolinguistic Intelligence, coordinated with freed populations to establish communication networks across former Dominion territories. The same mathematical principles he had used to decode alien communications became the foundation for organizing galaxy-wide resistance movements. Reports began reaching Earth of Dominion fleets retreating from contested systems, administrative governors abandoning their posts, and entire sectors declaring independence. The empire that had seemed invincible for centuries was fragmenting as word spread that they could be defeated. Admiral Lisa Chang reviewed intelligence reports from across the galaxy, tracking the collapse of Dominion authority in system after system. The psychological impact of losing an entire fleet to primitive humans had shattered the Empire's reputation for invincibility. They built their entire system on fear, Chang explained to President Santos during their weekly briefing. Once that fear was broken, their subject populations realized they could fight back and win. The most remarkable development came from worlds that had never been directly conquered by the Dominion. Entire civilizations began reaching out to Earth, offering alliance against other oppressive regimes and requesting assistance in developing their own defensive capabilities. Within a year of first contact, Earth had become the center of a galactic alliance based not on conquest or domination, but on mutual protection and cooperation. The Terran Defense Corps established training facilities on dozens of worlds, teaching the tactics and technologies that had proven so effective against seemingly superior forces. Tom Mitchell, now serving as a technical advisor to newly liberated worlds, stood on the bridge of a ship approaching his 5th assistance mission. Looking out at the stars, he reflected on how much had changed since that morning when strange people in military uniforms had shown up at his mine. Hard to believe it all started because someone was listening to the wrong frequency, he commented, to Susan Lee, who had become the intelligence coordinator for liberation operations. Not the wrong frequency, Susan replied, reviewing reports from resistance movements on 3 different worlds. Exactly the right frequency at exactly the right time. The aliens made a call they shouldn't have and we picked up. Back on Earth, President Santos received a communication from the edge of known space. Another species, calling themselves the Confederation, requested assistance dealing with an aggressive neighbor that had begun making territorial demands backed by military threats. She forwarded the request to Admiral Chong, who smiled as she began planning humanity's next intervention. The galaxy was learning that Earth didn't just defend itself, it defended others. The hunters who had preyed on weaker species for millennia now faced an enemy that hunted them in return. Dr. Emma Watson's latest project involved establishing defensive networks around vulnerable worlds, using the same principles that had protected Earth. The technology that had once been humanity's secret weapon was being shared freely with any species willing to stand against oppression. The Dominion Empire continued to shrink as more worlds gained their freedom. Some submitted peacefully, their governors recognizing that resistance was futile. Others required liberation by force, but human-led fleets made those operations swift and decisive. The final irony came when representatives of the Dominion government arrived at Earth requesting peace negotiations. The empire that had planned to harvest humanity as a resource found itself begging for mercy from the species they had dismissed as primitive. President Santos met with the Dominion diplomats in the same secure facility where Earth's leaders had planned their defense 6 months earlier. Her response was simple and non-negotiable: complete withdrawal from all conquered territories, reparations for enslaved populations, and submission to galactic oversight of their future activities. The age of easy conquest was indeed over. In its place had risen something the galaxy had never seen before, a civilization powerful enough to enforce peace, but wise enough to seek cooperation over domination. The call the aliens shouldn't have. Maid had awakened something far more dangerous than they could have imagined, and far more hopeful than the galaxy had dared to dream.